Brian. Hi, Raj.
Hello there, Marion. Raj, so
Hello.
good to be with you.
We're so excited to have you here today, Brian. Thank you so much.
It's a joy.
And, Brian, if you want to introduce yourself just briefly, you're the founder and CEO of Evolved into Evolution. So why don't you introduce yourself quickly?
Absolutely. Well, hello, everyone. I'm Brian Bachand. I'm the founder of Evolution. And why is it called Evolution? It is my company that unites all of my expertise from being a former priest, so the sense of spirituality, a former executive, and now it unites it that I help evolved leaders to be fully aligned to make the greatest impact as individuals and in their companies in the world today. And so that's where I spend my time, my energy, expertise, in helping others be fully evolved and aligned with their purpose.
Wow. That's amazing, Brian. That's really amazing. And, you're talking about evolved leaders, and you kind of already went into like what your idea is of an evolved leader. But when you look at it more specifically, what are the traits and the characteristics of such a leader?
So, I love the term evolution, hence I use it twice in the name of my company, because evolution is something that happens to us, but it's also something that we can own our evolution. And particularly as leaders, for me, an evolved leader is someone who is open to what is happening in their life. So often there are individuals, they begin their professional life thinking, oh, I'm a lawyer, I'm an engineer, I'm whatever occupation, and this is where I need to be in 10 years, this is where I need to be in 20 years, I'll retire at this age. But truly to be an evolved leader is one to be open to what may evolve in your life in new ways. And the number one aspect of an evolved leader is someone that does the inner work every day, so they're fully open to making the greatest impact in the world.
That is very interesting. And what pops to mind as you're talking about owning is responsibility, right? And as individuals, as leaders, that so often we think of leadership coming with a title and coming even from a style of leadership to, we are in charge, or we have teams that we need to manage or lead. But like that really owning the responsibility of it and making sure that we are there for them, right? And helping them reach their potential. That is something that I believe comes along with that evolution. Am I right in that? Is that kind of the idea behind that?
You get the prize. Absolutely. That is exactly what it's about. It is about owning. It truly is. And, I think I did a post on this not too long ago. One piece of the best advice I ever received was from a boss that I was fairly new. It was a huge portfolio. And at one of our one-to-one meetings, she looked at me at the very end and she leaned in and she said, Brian, I'm just going to give you a little piece of advice. Own it. And I remember at that moment, it was kind of like someone threw water on me. And, right away I went into the mindset of like, in the feeling, well, I am, of course, like a little defensive, but she said, own it. Own every aspect of this. The things that come natural, the challenges in the team. And I remember, that was incredibly, that's so true, because by owning it, I had to own myself and I had to own my leadership. I had to own where I felt confident and where I felt insecure. And that's really what helped me to evolve in that role. And it helped also the team to evolve and to be aware. When we own things, we take responsibility, and we also take the step to be courageous in what we have to do too.
Yeah. This, when we're talking about owning, that's a beautiful example, Brian. Thanks for sharing. It's as we're going through our leadership journeys,
Mhm.
I found that often it's difficult for leaders to admit mistakes, or that we don't know everything, right? It's like almost perceived as a sign of weakness, when really, like, listening to you, it is actually a sign of strength,
Mhm.
right? When you're getting to that point of feeling okay with saying, I don't know, what do you think? Or
Mhm.
gathering the information that you might need to make an educated decision, or simply owning up to a mistake that might have happened.
Mhm. Absolutely. Recently, one of the areas I work, in my company, Evolution, with one segment are new CEOs. These are individuals who, have been driven to become a CEO, that want that role. They're now
Mm-hmm.
there. But now that they're there, there's this sense they have to keep proving themselves,
Mm-hmm.
and they have to know everything. And with one particular CEO, I was working with her, and she said, "Oh, I don't have all this information of how to present to the clients, because that's something I never did in the past." And I said, "You don't have to know how to do that." I
Mm-hmm.
said, "As CEO, you need to know who to bring in, who to invite in." And it's a great moment to shine the
Mm-hmm.
light on them and to say,
Mm-hmm.
"I'm going to turn it
Mm-hmm.
over to them and their expertise."
Mm-hmm.
Because that really is important. As CEO, or as any leader, you need to know when to shine the light on others. And in return, that light will just flash back on you too. When we try and
Yes.
cover the light, it holds us back.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that brings up actually a really interesting correlation to that, which I find oftentimes happening with leaders that are stepping into, like, the first leadership role, where
Mhm.
they're managing a team. And perhaps that might be a similar situation, not so much that you are now the head of a company, but you're stepping and taking on that responsibility for a team, and making that shift,
Mhm.
right? Like getting to that point where, no, you don't need to have all the kudos, the spotlight, or even going down and doing all the work yourself. Now is the time to really develop, enhance, mentor others. And it's such a beautiful, like shift that is happening in that thinking and in that mindset, that
Mhm.
I've been finding in that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one thing too. You mentioned something, whether it's someone that's moving into their first leadership role, or
Mhm.
CEO, whatever it might be. It could be being asked to be part of a board for the first time. One thing we have to be aware of is that that is a moment for us to evolve, to move
Mhm.
forward. But also sometimes those opportunities trigger things within us. And it can
Mhm.
trigger an insecurity. It can trigger a sense of, well, I know I'm good at this, but that person seems so much smarter than me. So I'm just going to remain quiet. And we had to be attentive to that as well, because when we're asked to move into a leadership role, it also highlights our strengths, but it can also trigger some of those insecurities or things that
Mhm.
we feel. And that's really important, to not be afraid of them, to recognize them, and to start to embrace them, because that's a moment to evolve and to grow forward as well.
Mhm. And that kind of brings me into the whole topic of mindset, which I would also love to talk to you about. Mindset in relation even to spirituality and that growth, because as we're talking about evolving as leaders or growing, a lot of it has to do with our mindset
Mhm.
and our spirituality potentially. And I'd love to hear your thoughts about that. Like, where does that all come together? How are you working with people? What are you experiencing in that regard?
Sure. So it's a topic I love to talk about. And so, one of the things to be aware of, first of all, the word and term spirituality is one that you hear, and it can mean different things for different people. So I think it's important right away just to kind of say, what does that mean? Spirituality, from my point, and I think for so many that are there, is, it's that sense of knowing your core values, knowing what you desire to bring forth into the world, how you want
Mm-hmm.
to show up and as authentically as possible. And so the bottom line is the leaders who do the inner work and embrace a deeper sense of their own spirit are the leaders who are most aligned in making impact and success in the world. It's that simple. And they're the ones who are more intuitive. They're the ones who will listen more with their team. They're the ones who are more human in the workplace. We hear so much about workplace toxic cultures, and a lot of that is because it's individuals that are fearful, that lead with a sense of power, but not looking at the individuals. And it's because there's not a lot of that inner work. So what does that inner work mean? Well, for everyone, it's different. It can be having a meditation practice, being mindful how they work, being sensitive to individuals at a meeting, to what's said and what's not said. That's probably one of the biggest things. I was recently part of a meeting and someone showed into the meeting and they said they'd just gotten news of a loved one that died, but they felt comfortable enough to come to the meeting to share it, and they still wanted to be there. And the person running the meeting, it was quite impressive just to see how they changed the focus in the meeting. That it wasn't just a sense of shutting them down. Oh, I'm so sorry. Well, don't feel you have to stay. They really said, so tell us about this cousin who passed away. Share with us a little bit more. And it changed the whole dynamic of the team. And that's about being human. And that changes that. And that only comes from a sense of knowing your own spirituality within who you are, and really embracing the human component of the individuals that are before you.
That is a beautiful, beautiful story. I can definitely relate to that. And that brings up actually quite a few other topics I'd love to dive in with you. And that's that human component to it, because at the end of the day, we are all people, right? And we're showing up at work, we are having important projects, we're having important meetings. A lot of the corporate world, especially when it comes to leadership, might be ego-driven, fear-based, where what if this doesn't get delivered? What if we don't get this client? What if something goes wrong? And where do you start, or what do you think about like that fear-based, ego-driven, when you're finding yourself in a situation like that? Where do you start? Because you can't change necessarily the leaders that are in charge of your department, and I wonder what is your point of view? How can we go about that so we can create a more human-based environment?
So 2 things on that. So 1, it always begins with ourselves. We often, whether it's in a relationship with a partner, a spouse, a good friend, oh, they would only change this or do this, it would be so much easier. And the same happens in the workplace, is right. But we have to begin with ourselves. That when you take that time, so maybe you're working in an environment with a very challenging colleague. There could be a colleague that's just so challenging. We've all had them that, they're curt, they don't follow through, or whatever it might be. Fine. The issue is seeing that as an opportunity to even go more inward, that to say, okay, this is the situation. It's triggering something within me of how I'm reacting. How can I bring a new approach to this? And, it can be very small. It can be, some of the things that may come to you through just doing a quick breathing meditation before you, oh my gosh, you go on the Zoom with the person, just taking a minute to just calm, to do a breathing exercise, and to just tell yourself like, okay, I'm going to be present. No matter what they say, I'm just going to listen. I don't have to respond in that very moment. Just small things like that can have a huge ripple effect, because you're getting centered into the conversation and changing that. Those are some of the things I do when I work with clients who are in challenging situations. We work together about not changing the individual, but changing who they are, because that energy in yourself is going to have an impact in a profound way as you show up. The other aspect too is working as a leader, leaders who have a mindset that want to go into really bringing that sense of inner work into their life and their company. That's powerful. One of the things I did with a big executive in a big pharma company is we came up with a strategy to begin the meetings with gratitude. And these are highly driven individuals that have huge demands, huge profit goals next to them. And they started doing a gratitude every single week. Each person had to say one thing they're grateful for in their life and grateful for professionally. Changed the whole dynamic because people started understanding things about each other. People opened up more. And, that had more of an impact than their boating summer trips and drinks after work and all the other things, which are all good. But that moment of hearing gratitude changed the energy and the dynamic and broke down some barriers that had never been broken down before.
Oh, wow. Wow. That's fantastic. Have you ever heard or seen that when a leader is trying to implement that maybe there is one or two people that are like, oh, here comes the gratitude again, right? Like, what's this exercise? Like the cynists. Like, have you ever seen that? And if so, what would be your response to that when you're sitting in this room and you're coaching some, a leader that is genuinely wanting to do that, but has others that might not jump on board?
Absolutely. And that's always the biggest fear. That's probably the biggest thing that the leaders are nervous to do, because oh, this person is so challenging and, what are they going to think? And I said, that's okay. If they come back and they say something like, oh, I'm really not into this, or it's the gratitude thing again, just, a great way to say it is at the beginning to say, if this is new for you, sometimes you just have to be open to the practice. But I'm just so grateful you're here, that you're voicing your honesty. That's the way I would say it. Just say to them, wow, I'm just grateful you're honest. I'm grateful you're honest, but I'm grateful you're here. Wow, that changes it. You can't go wrong with that, right?
You can't.
And usually what happens is the person realizes, okay, well, I'll say something. I'm grateful for my dog. They start small, but then eventually they build.
Yeah. Yeah. And I also believe that perhaps that when you have others that really jump in with this and you notice as the naysayer, so to speak, you notice how the dynamic changes and how people are really starting to connect, because I would imagine that also not just changes the energy, but also the connection within.
Totally. And that's the goal, because it changes the whole dynamic of things. And, and so I'm a firm believer, building off my background, having been a former priest, practice what you preach. So I became a chair of a board in April, an organization I've been part of. And so for the first board meeting, everything is still virtual right now. We weren't meeting in person, and, people are itching. Part of the benefit of the board meetings were, you got there before and you'd kind of chit chat a little bit and stay after. And so I said, how can I bring people together and change the energy? And I actually began with a gratitude exercise that every board member had to begin saying something they were grateful for, that was in their life, grateful for being part of the organization. And I invited the staff who were present to also do it. That was incredible. The energy that came up, what people shared, and even the people a couple of people that I was a little nervous, like, wonder how this is going to go for them. They actually were the most engaged. They didn't speak at the beginning, but at the end, they were the ones that said a lot. And it really has an impact. It just changes the dynamic. And it really is something that the more gratitude you have, the more you can articulate it and express it, the more it leads to abundance.
Yeah, you're speaking into the Zoom and the connection or disconnection that I believe a lot of people are feeling, especially after a time where, sure, we should all be used to by now, but we're also kind of getting wary
Mhm.
of the Zoom and frankly, even that part of the internet and like everything or a lot of things being virtual, where there are lots of advantages to this. I mean, look at us here. Raj is in India, you are in Canada, I'm in the US. Would that be a possibility that necessarily would be there all the time, or was there as much as we are really embracing it today? But at the same time, often when I speak with people or leaders, there is a certain level of disconnect or connection. And I wonder like what your thoughts are on that topic and whether or not, you know, where you kind of come in on that. How do you look at that and what's your experience? Do
Mm.
people feel that? What are you doing to, you know, to really feel like less lonely, less kind of left in field after you close down your computer because you're not having these conversations in the coffee line or seeing somebody on the way to the bathroom?
Mm-hmm. So the benefit is we're moving, to an opportunity now that there will be more in person, and that's great. But I'm a firm believer, and I think many are as well, that there will continue to be a very strong online presence in a hybrid aspect. I think one of the things that's so important to remember is our eye contact and our words and our tone. So even if we are virtual, the way you make eye contact through a Zoom, the way you use your tone, the way you use your words still creates a bond, and that's so important.
Mm,
And I think, one of the big issues, and I think something that I see leaders who I call my evolved leaders really know that even if we're virtual, our presence still can be felt.
mhm,
And the way you use words, the way you thank someone, small things like that can change everything. And even in the written communication, I really can't emphasize enough. We've become very relaxed that sometimes people are just kind of rude, even when they send a message, use the person's name, say thank you. Those small things really speak and respect the
mhm,
individuals. And that's
mhm,
so important. So I think it's one of the things you have to do. You have to work it. You really have to create an environment where maybe there is an opportunity to talk a little bit. It's not always easy at Zoom, but you could do the gratitude. You can have a moment that every person gets to share, something. I know one team that does something called Weekend Warriors. On Monday morning when they have their team, what was your weekend warrior moment? Like, what did you do? Or, I cooked this big dinner. I did this. Little things that create that change the environment. And we're human beings, whether
mhm.
you're running an asset management company or you're, a frontline worker, wherever it might be, we're humans. And we always have to make sure that's integrated into our
Mhm.
work.
Mhm. Yeah, that is a great reminder that regardless of our roles, regardless of our responsibilities, we're all human beings.
Mhm.
And I believe sometimes we have to give ourselves the permission to really take a step back or a moment to breathe. Because like for me, for example, the driving to somewhere is very meditative because I
Mhm.
do nothing but drive. And
Mhm.
uh, and I enjoy driving. But when I'm going in Zoom, it's very easy to overschedule. And I always say like maybe 2, 3 max of Zooms a day
Mhm.
is plenty. But I have also seen others that are scheduling Zoom after Zoom after Zoom, and after time they're feeling really exhausted
Mhm.
because it's, you do have to, I believe, allow yourself that step back and realize that perhaps even from an emotional standpoint with everything going on, to take that time and really be be forgiving with yourself.
Mhm. Mm. That's a really beautiful thing that you said, to be forgiving with yourself, because so often we're not. We're extremely, extremely difficult in critiquing, but to be forgiving of making sure that you have the time and making sure that you forgive yourself too, if you're getting kind of sucked into that go, 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 to say, I need to step away. I need to step away. That's so
Yeah.
true.
And perhaps that goes back to your earlier point of owning it and growing, right? It does start with you. And I do truly believe in what you said. And that was actually beautiful, when regardless what is happening around us, I found it often is a mirror of something that I need to personally work on. And I'd love to hear your opinion on that too, Brian, from that perspective. Like when we keep getting similar experiences over and over into our lives. I was talking about that the other day with somebody. And is that just a coincidence, in your opinion? Or is that truly something that perhaps is a mirror in front of us to say, okay, why does this experience keep repeating itself? And how can I grow? And how can I take that responsibility and owning it to say, okay, I am breaking that cycle? And if so, how do you break that cycle? What's your thoughts on that?
Oh my gosh. So I totally believe that if you keep getting into certain situations, or if there's certain people or relationships that keep happening and happening, and like, oh, this keeps happening. So there's a couple of things. One, you're attracting that. Number two, it's also an opportunity. The lessons are going to keep showing up until you listen to them. So that's the bottom line. So if it keeps happening, there's a lesson there. And you just eventually you're going to see like, wow, I need to be attentive to this. And or it's going to be brought to your attention in a very strong way, because unless we pay attention to them, it's going to remain, and it will have an impact. I think back to when I was in the seminary, one evening, I was in my room working, and I was so focused on this paper or whatever I had to do. And I'm like those horses in Central Park. I lived in Manhattan for years that have those blinders, when they go through. I was like in the blinders. I was focused on what I had to do. There was a knock at my door, and I was just irritated. Like there was like, oh, like who's coming to see me, right? I got to get this done. I opened the door, and it's my classmate who came to ask me a very simple question. And he told me, and so I asked what it was, and he wanted to keep chatting, but I obviously gave off a vibe like, it's time for you to go. And every year we used to get evaluations by our classmates and different things. And he wrote about that experience to me, gave me feedback, and said it was like an iceberg. And he said, you're so always friendly, but he said, but when you're focused on wanting to do something as a disruption, you're very intent. And that was such a gift, because I remember thinking, how would that be if someone came to see me in a need? Or, when I was, an executive, when someone knocked at the door, say, oh, I just have a quick question. The way I approach, the way I respond is going to have a huge ripple effect. And to be self-aware is so, so important. And those lessons keep showing up for me. I'm telling you, like it's something that just keeps happening, interruptions. And it did for many years after. And I would catch myself as sometimes kind of going into, like, I need to get this done. And I'm like, no, you're here. You have to remember that. So yeah, I'm a firm believer. Absolutely. The lessons show up, so we have an opportunity to integrate and grow from it.
Wow. Yeah, that's an interesting experience, because, and I believe we are all guilty to some extent to that. Sometimes we get so sucked into whatever it is that we're doing. And just the other day, actually, I was thinking about that very topic because I noticed how I changed feeling when I started focusing on someone else instead of myself. Like when I would have a conversation with somebody, and and I would kind of bring my points across and the energy that I felt within, versus when the conversation shifted and I realized, well, this person over on the other side didn't have all the answers. They had their own set of whatever they were dealing with or worried about. And just shifting that to say, oh, there's something that I can contribute to this person right this moment.
Mm-hmm.
It shifted how I felt. And so I was thinking about that very topic of, how can we, or how does that translate into the corporate world? But of course, all of your friendships and everything else, and why do we keep sometimes slipping into the old of looking at it from our own perspective versus, like, I guess it's practice.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's practice, and it's also a sense of being aware of your own presence in your own inner work. It really is. And I think it's just that sense of who you are and how you present yourself is going to have a huge impact on those around you. It really, really will. And it's one of the things is that's how we keep evolving, right? Those things are what help us. We're never going to have it all perfect. And I think we have to give ourselves that gift to realize I'm always going to be growing. And there are going to be some days that I'm going to do really, really well. And there's some days, as you so beautifully said, I have to forgive myself and realign and start again. And that's okay. That's the gift. That is the gift of being an evolved leader, that you own, that you are always growing and you start again. And we move forward with joy and with peace in that. That's the gift. It's not about perfection. It's about constantly every day deciding that you're here for a reason and you're here to be present to the best of your ability.
So Brian, to wrap up this amazing session here together in this time, I want to talk a little bit and have your opinion and thoughts on authenticity, because that is a word that we hear so much. It's out there and everybody's talking about how you can be your authentic self and how important that is. And truly, in principle, it's very important when we're looking at leadership and companies and really in life, being authentic. But what does that really even mean? And what makes an authentic leader in your opinion? And how does that tie in with, like, your character and how you show up in life and business?
Yeah, definitely happy to share a few thoughts around that. First of all, I think it's fantastic, amazing, every wonderful word I can say, that the word authenticity is spoken about now more than ever, because that just shows there's an awakening, there's a newness, the people are craving that. When people voice certain things, it's an indication of something inwardly that they're seeking and they want. So I think that's fantastic. But everyone has a different interpretation of what does it mean to be authentic. Does it mean that being authentic mean you have to share every aspect of your life? Maybe for one person it does, but it doesn't mean that's for everybody. But it means being at the core, holding your values and owning your truth. That's what it means for me. And it directly relates to, for me, authenticity in the workplace as an evolved leader means consistency of character. It's really how I see it. CC, consistency of character. That, we will respect leaders more that when they're at a client meeting and they could be charming at the door and being there and so kind. And then when they leave, that they continue that same type of presence with those around them. We all know leaders, or we've heard of stories of leaders that change. They become a bully after that. They're one way in front of someone who's going to give them money or a contract, and they're different behind the scenes. Consistency of character is what authenticity is, because it means that you are consistent in who you are as a person. That if you are really someone that believes in kindness and wanting to be generous, it's consistently seen in how you work with clients, how you manage, how you engage in your own life. And that to me is what's so important. And that is what people are craving. I think that's why there's such a talk about it. They want consistency and they want to see that. No one wants to be in a relationship with someone that's like crazy one moment and then you come home and they're all loving. I mean, that's dysfunction. That's why so many workplaces are dysfunctional, because it's not a consistency of the character of the person. So that's how I describe it.
That's beautiful. And it really takes out that uncertainty in when we know somebody is consistent in their actions, who they are, we feel that we know them. We know what to expect versus this constant, well, how is he or she going to react this time, right? Or if something is not going well. And beautiful. And so, Brian, thank you so much for being here today with us. I think this wraps it up. And I know there's a lot more to come, maybe at a future session, because we can dive into holding the values and all the things that you were sharing with us. Thank you.
Well, what a joy. Thank you. And thank you for having the stage to share about this. And I welcome the opportunity to go even deeper into some of these areas, which I think are so important to evolving as a person, evolving as a leader. So congratulations to both of you for being courageous to be an evolved leader and speak about this.
Thank you so much,
Yes.
Brian.